Welcome back to Healthy Mind, Healthy Life. I am Nazish, and tonight's conversation goes somewhere we don't talk about enough on the shows about longevity. My guest today is Dr. Erik Schraga, a concierge physician and longevity medicine specialist practicing in the Portola Valley, California, at the heart of Silicon Valley. He has over 2 decades of experience caring for someone of the most informed and high functioning patient in the world. He's trained at in Emory, the University of Washington, and UCLA, has served in senior leadership roles at major Bay Area medical centers, founded Bay Mobile Care, and serves as chief editor of the procedures sections at the Medscape and WebMD. He writes at the Longevity Lens on drshakarga.com, where he engages people at their level with evidence based, honest medicine. So, tonight we're not talking about supplements or biohacks. We are talking about the most underappreciated pillar of real longevity, mental health, and why anxiety is, even in the most optimized lives, is quietly through the roof. So I welcome you to the show, Dr. Eric.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really a pleasure to get this opportunity to talk to you.
Wonderful. So before we go ahead, listeners, some statements reflect personal belief and experiences and are presented as individual views, not medical advices. So listeners should consult qualified professionals for medical conditions. So, Dr. Eric, before we start with this conversation, like I know that you have spent your days with patients who have access to the best of everything, and they have read the research, they know the science, and they have tried the intervention. So, when did you first realize that for all the optimization happening around you, the deeper issue, the anxiety, and the underneath the data wasn't getting addressed?
Well, that's a great question. And I think that it has been a matter of a creep, meaning that over time it has gotten worse. It wasn't that just one thing happened that caused a huge shift, but rather modern, really just modern society has increased anxiety, that there are more demands, whether it's financial or uh, social media. You could go on and on about what it is about our modern society that is increasing anxiety. And interestingly, we do so much in depth evaluation of our patients, looking at what their risks are and what they could do to optimize that. An interesting thing is happening where I've found that people now, to some degree, by being aware, have also increased their anxiety. We have so many more ways of monitoring metrics and monitoring our health. And in doing so, that has made people hyper alert and just added one more aspect to be worried about and to have anxiety. So with all of this going on, it's easy to ignore the anxiety, but often not until a point that it reaches a breaking point.
That is something. I mean, that though these things really tell us about how we are not addressing the issues that are required to be addressed in ourselves.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I find that when it comes to medicine in general, and even more so in mental health, that people don't always want to put the work in to get better. They want a quick fix or an easy answer when it comes to sleep. And so often sleep is related to the anxiety and worries that people have. It's so much easier for someone to take a pill than it is to do the work of cognitive therapies that are more beneficial, or to say I'm putting away my computer and I'm not going to have alcohol. Um, People would rather just take a pill and have that part be better, but you're not addressing the underlying problem and you probably making things worse.
Yeah, that is so true. So, Everyone is measuring something, like they're testing something, supplementing something. I'm curious, from your vantage point as a physician inside the most informed patient population in the world, what is the biggest misconception that people carry about what real longevity actually requires?
Oh, that's such a good question. And when it comes to testing, I think people believe that testing really gives a really good view of what's happening in the body and that these results will give us answers. And that's often not the case, that we can do many, many, many tests and really still not get a perfect picture of what's going on with somebody. And more testing doesn't always mean better testing. That testing tends to be most useful when we are looking to confirm something we already believe to be the case or rule out something. There are instances in which screening is important, but I don't think that with all of this testing that we are really getting the full picture, and it's certainly not getting the picture of stress and anxiety, mental health just through labs. That being said, we there are certain ways of monitoring people now that will give them clues that there is too much anxiety. Even though certain lab values like your cortisol are not great at giving the full picture, you can look at certain metrics like the heart rate variability that tells us, hey, in times of stress, is the sympathetic nervous system, that fight or flight, overriding the parasympathetic of response of calm. And so there are actually ways of monitoring that people aren't recognizing. They're just looking at their step counts or they're looking at their sleep numbers, but there are certain metrics there that have value, and gives some people actual data for those that are data driven, something to show them, look, your heart rate variability has been miserable and it's been getting worse and you're not sleeping as well. This is not something that is a minor issue. This is your body is responding to this and not in a good way.
Yeah. I believe we try to avoid it. Like it sounds like data alone cannot always capture the full human experience.
Absolutely not. Um, the way you state that, the full human experience, I really like because that human experience is so much about what medicine is about. We are not machines. And I
Yeah.
don't know, maybe it's because we're here in the Silicon Valley that think that with more data that you can engineer the body, but you can't engineer the body. And um, whether it be doing tests looking at your biological age, doing tests to look at your what your longevity is. It's not as easy as that, and uh, it, as I said, it does take work, especially when it comes to these components of medicine that are not as data driven,
Mm.
like mental health.
Yes. Yeah, that is so true. And especially when it comes to things like stress and anxiety that don't always show up neatly on a test.
Yeah, and often they don't, but they're unmistakable when you get to the heart of what is of symptoms. People generally don't come in and talk to me, and when I say it sounds like this is largely anxiety driven, they don't sound shocked. People know when anxiety is a problem. So it's less about diagnosing it than it is about addressing it. And that addressing it part is what is a challenge. People don't want to give up their lifestyle. People don't want to give up the hours they're putting in and the complexity of their lives. People don't want to walk away from that. And so I as I often say to people, stress is normal, stress is expected, and I'm not asking you to stop doing things that are stressful. It's about how are you managing it? How are you managing the stress in a way that is healthy? Are you managing it in a way that is actually making things worse, whether it be that you're just simply distracting yourself? Are you drinking alcohol? Or using sedatives versus are you meditating? Are you are you getting out and getting exercise? And then another part of that is just your social interactions. Such a big piece of mental health is about those social interactions and meaningful social interactions that I'm afraid that, again, in modern society, we're not as dependent on, and need to remain at the core of our lives.
This reframe is really important more than people realize, like, because we have been sold longevity as a stack, a list of optimization series of metrics to manage. But what you are saying is something so much deeper than that, that you can have a safe, you can have a perfect APOB and still live in a body that feels unsafe inside its own.
Yeah, exactly, and look, um, I certainly don't mean to suggest that there isn't value in what we're doing in longevity, because in the longevity space, we're recognizing that a lot of these tests that we do are very valid and are very helpful, and people aren't getting them done. It's less about them not being as important than it is to say that they are only part of the picture and that you do need to look at the whole picture. Otherwise, everything else won't matter.
Yes, yes, that is so true. So, I think longevity has become a movement. Like everyone is measuring something and all these things are happening. But anxiety is also there. Like anxiety as a record level, even among the people with extraordinary resources and knowledge and access to care. So, what do you see, like after 2 decades of clinical practice, as an actual root pattern driving this rise?
You know, I hate to say it, but in some ways, the longevity movement has increased anxiety for the reasons I said, which is that because you can track, the more that you track, the more you pay attention to. And I've had times where I've looked down and realized I had an Aura ring and a Whoop and on at the same time, along with my Apple Watch, and I'm getting alerts. I'm checking to see where my sleep score is. And that's a complete misuse of these gadgets. And why do I use all of this? Well, for me, it's a learning experience. And I love being a part of my own experiment because I can give feedback to others. In fact, I was saying this before it became very widely known that people are actually having more anxiety because they're checking their sleep score when they wake up. And it rarely ever, if ever, gives them anything beneficial because if they wake up and get a poor sleep score, they may actually say, "Oh, I'm not supposed to feel good." That I my my Aura ring told me that I didn't sleep well and that I'm not supposed to be active today. When really what matters is, well, how do you feel when you wake up? And so looking at these over the big picture, I like people ignoring it. Wear it, and then after a week, we'll review. Or if you're going to take an actionable step to see whether or not there was a change that was positive, that's when I find it useful. So if you said, okay, I'm going to start getting better sleep, I'm going to stop drinking. And for 2 weeks, I'm going to not drink. And then at the end of that 2 weeks, let's see how your sleep score changed. That's a good use of it, um, as opposed to it telling you how you should feel.
Yeah. And when you actually start seeing those changes in you, even though they are little, big, or small, but as simple as improving your sleep quality, as simple as feeling happy through the day or getting, and just going through the day, it really matters. It really makes you feel so much better about yourself.
Absolutely. And look, this is the reason that we're having this conversation is because this does matter and because it does pay off. It just takes work to get there. And if it wasn't going to make your life better, we wouldn't stress it so much, would we? It's it,
Absolutely.
there
Yeah,
is there's a better life on the other side, and so uh, it is so important that we continue to push this and recognize how vital it is for our patients.
I completely agree. And, there is something sobering in what you said. Like, we have treated anxiety like a system to manage when it is often keeping body, when it is often the body keeping scores on life that hasn't slowed down in years.
Yeah, exactly. And I read a very interesting article from one of my colleagues recently about this and about the idea of running hot. The idea that we by doing more and being driven, that that contributes so much to burnout. And the comparison that my colleague made was that race cars, they burn out, they need to be fixed all the time, but the Toyota Camry lasts forever, and that perhaps we need to focus more on running cool than we do need to focus on being the best, being the fastest, being more driven. And that also goes for health, that we need to be cognizant of what matters, but we should not be hyper alert to every little signal that is is unlikely to be of true significance.
Yeah, that is so true. And picture to a person like list any person who anybody who might be listening right now, like maybe there's a professional, there's a founder or a parent, someone who's trying to keep up, like they're sleeping with a ring on their finger. They're tracking the stress on their watch, just like you said. So how does this kind of chronic optimized anxiety actually show up in someone's daily life?
Well, it often doesn't show up until they slow down. When
Okay.
you're going full speed, you feed off of that adrenaline, you feed off of that sympathetic nervous system being driven, and it's when you try to slow down that you realize you can't, and that's where it's a problem. And like what I said with sleep, well, that's a perfect time where you're supposed to be letting your mind cool off, and instead you're still going, going, going. And so that's when you are most likely to feel it, but it doesn't mean that there are other times during the day where that sympathetic drive, that high cortisol levels aren't having effects on you. And you may not be feeling those effects. You're not feeling the effects of the high cortisol. It may be manifesting in ways that are detrimental, but are not directly obvious. For example, eating, your cortisol levels are high, you're more likely to be stress eating. Your ability to just cool down and enjoy yourself taking a walk is not there because you can't calm your mind. And and so these are in so many ways you don't see the what is lingering underneath that needs to be fixed. And so when we do have those obvious signs like sleep or something more severe like a panic attack, I think it's important to recognize that it is now you're I don't want to say too far gone, but you're they're simply manifestations of what has been going on for quite some time.
Yeah, that is so true. There has been manifestations and we do see little things, but just like always, we see it, we just let it go.
Yeah.
But
Well,
like I believe everybody who has come to this point in this podcast will actually be thinking about those things because I am.
yeah.
So yeah, it does land with a lot of our listeners tonight.
Well, and look, I think that uh, it's easy to recognize these because look, I've lived that life. I was an ER doctor for much of my career, and I was driven by that. I was driven by the go, go, go. And it was when I shifted gears in my life that that go, go, go never ended. And so when I preach what people should be doing, recognize that, hey, it's a challenge for me too. And so I know how difficult it can be. And, and yet I could also say that there is as I said before, a better life on the other side.
Absolutely. That is so true. And I think there aren't the shallow breath, the disrupted sleep, and the chest that never quite unwinds, and the inability, this is the to be in a quiet room without reaching for the phone. I mean, these aren't the quirks of modern life. They're actually the signals from the system that has been carrying too much for far too long.
Exactly. And a funny story along those lines, and saying before about having to check myself. I found that I was trying to get my 5-year-old daughter to bed, and that she was a little bit amped up, and I just wanted her to get to sleep so I can go back to getting my work done. And she started teaching me a breathing exercise. My 5-year-old, who something essentially like box breathing, which she called it starfish breathing, where she would trace her finger up her thumb on inhale and down her thumb on exhale and up her index finger. It was basically box breathing, and I'm thinking to myself, "Wow, my 5-year-old is teaching me something, and not teaching me something that is just something bizarre she learned on TV." I mean, she likely learned it in class, but what a valuable thing to be doing for children, and it's times like this where you think, "Boy, are we what is it that we're teaching our children? Are we teaching our children about how to be on our cell phones all the time and how to not be present?" And we can learn so much from children who don't have that anxiety, and we need to make sure that we don't pass that on to the next generation. So, um, it's, it's a learned behavior, and it's learned because of our societal pressures and how we feel like we need to keep pushing and driving, but we still need to live our lives in a way that is fulfilling.
That is so true. And Dr. Eric, this has been such a wonderful conversation with you. So before we close, I just want to ask you something that on behalf of everybody listening tonight who has built an impressive life on the outside and who is doing all the right things on the paper, and who so quietly wonders why do they still feel so anxious underneath all of it? What would you want them to hear tonight?
I would want them to take a step back and take some time out of your schedule to really reflect on what it is that you want out of life, and that what is the 10-year plan for you? Not what is it that you need to get done today, but what do you want to be able to, where do you want to be in 10 years? And what you're doing over the next several days is going to be a reflection of that. And if you're unhappy because of how much anxiety and stress you have, don't plan on it just getting better. There's no such thing that you will do something when life calms down. You have to make it calm down, and you have to come up with a plan of how it will calm down. Otherwise, it never will. It'll only get worse or continue. And you owe that to yourself. You deserve to be happy. You deserve to be well. Um, but it may take some reframing of what's important to you.
Absolutely. That is very true. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. And I believe longevity is not the absence of disease, it is the presence of a life worth living.
Wow, I like that.
Yeah. And the most important pillar of a long, healthy years is one that we have spent the least time honoring. That is our mental health.
Absolutely. Well, I really appreciate you bringing this to light and talking about this with me and on other podcasts. I think what you all are doing is wonderful, and you have such a great message. So keep up the great work.
We will, but I believe there will be listeners who want to follow your work because it is absolutely wonderful and the longevity lens and learn more about how you practice and everything. So what is the best place for them to find you?
Yeah. So the best place, I do have a Substack, which is the Longevity Lens. You could also see most of my posts on my website at www.drschraga.com. And Uh, those are the main platforms I'm using, and you're welcome to reach out to me through either of those platforms.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Eric, for this wonderful episode. I will make sure to include these details into the show notes so that a lot of people can reach out to you and learn from you. Thank you so much for being here with us.
And thank you so much.
Yeah. And dear listeners, that was our episode of Healthy Mind, Healthy Life. If something in this conversation made you pause, made you wonder if the anxiety you have been carrying is asking for something more than another supplement or another tracker, take that as a sign. So, tonight, before you reach out for your phone, before you check one more metric, do one quiet thing. Sit for 60 seconds, no screen, no input, just you and the breath that has been keeping you alive. The most underappreciated pillar of your longevity is the one you can build right here. So until we meet here again, take care of that that's been carrying you and take care of that mind that's been carrying it. So we will see you soon.